What's up YouTube, it's the one and only legend of winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another video. Recently, the Basketball Hall of Fame committee has decided to deny both Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace into the Hall of Fame. My opinion on that decision, that it's ridiculous, and because of this I decided to dedicate a video explaining how dominant that team was during the mid-2000s, because I think a lot of people just only look at what they were able to accomplish during the 2004 season without thoroughly having an understanding of how dominant they were for an extended period of time. But before we get that deep into their journey, I have to explain how they were able to build said unit. Our journey begins in the summer of 2000, as the Detroit Pistons were coming off an early exit in the playoffs as they lost in the first round due to Grant Hill suffering an injury. In fear that the injury was going to be career altering, the organization was forced to trade Grant Hill to the Orlando Magic. In return, they received Chucky Atkins and Ben Wallace. Now at this time, Ben Wallace was not a well-known name around the league. He had only been in the NBA for 4 years, he was an undrafted prospect, and Orlando was his second team in the 4 years that he had been in the NBA, and the organization was willing to trade him away after one season of play with the team. And quite honestly, in this transaction, Chucky Atkins was viewed as a higher commodity. So now, with Grant Hill removed from the organization, it was very clear that the Detroit Pistons were rebuilding. In the 2000-2001 season, the organization finished with a record of 32-50, and Jerry Stackhouse, despite the fact that he was a 30-point scorer, was shooting roughly around 40% from the field. But on the brighter side, Ben Wallace, out of nowhere, showed a lot of promise and progress in his game, even though he wasn't really a dominant scorer. Matter of fact, he just wasn't a scorer at all, as he finished that season averaging around 6 points per game. His dominance on the defensive end was definitely shown, averaging 13 rebounds on a night-to-night basis and recording over 2 blocks as well. And so moving into the next season, the organization had a very clear direction in which they were going to move in, building their identity on the defensive end, which is something that was easier said than done, as a lot of teams at this time period had players that were very dominant when it comes to their scoring abilities. But moving into the 2001-2002 season, the organization actually found their footing in the league. After changing head coaches and bringing in Rick Carlisle, the organization finished with a record of 50-32 and had the 8th best defense in the league. And as the team continued to progress, Ben Wallace continued to shine, as he ended that season averaging a little over 7 points, 13 rebounds, and led the NBA with 3.5 blocks. Ben Wallace will also go on to be selected for his first All-NBA team, his first All-Defensive team, and he was a recipient of his first Defensive Player of the Year award. Moving on into the 2002-2003 season, the organization made a massive overhaul in their roster. First, they decided to select Tayshaun Prince with the 23rd pick in the NBA draft. And Tayshaun Prince was not a very well-known prospect, however, because of his length and his athleticism, showed a lot of promise on the defensive end. The second thing they decided to do was sign Chauncey Billups. At this moment, Chauncey Billups was not viewed as a good player in the league, as he had been in the NBA for 5 years and participated on 4 different rosters. And finally, and arguably the biggest decision the organization decided to make, is trading away Jerry Stackhouse to the Washington Wizards. And in return, they received some few pieces, one of which being Rip Hamilton. At this point, Rip Hamilton had been in the NBA for 4 years and was coming off of his best statistical season, averaging 20 points and had pretty solid shooting splits. So with all the new faces on the roster, a lot of people were doubting the ability of the Detroit Pistons to duplicate the type of success they had in the previous season. But the Detroit Pistons, because of their resilience, especially from the names that were consistently overlooked over the past several seasons, they were able to overcome whatever doubt that people had of them, and they would go on to win 50 games that season. But what's even more impressive is that defensively they continued to get better, going from the 8th to the 4th ranked defense in the NBA that year. Chauncey Billups will go on to have his best season statistically, giving you 16 points, around 4 rebounds and assists, and shooting 39% from behind the arc. And Rip Hamilton did exactly what you expect out of Rip Hamilton, scoring roughly around 20 points while shooting 44% from the field. And then when it comes to Ben Wallace, he yet again had another phenomenal season defensively. He would finish that year averaging nearly 7 points, 15 rebounds, 3 blocks, while yet again making the All-NBA and All-Defensive team and receiving his second Defensive Player of the Year award. But what's even more impressive is how much success they had in the postseason, because despite the fact that they had a massive overhaul with their roster in the offseason, they still were able to make it to the conference finals. And a lot of people, including myself, believes if Chauncey Billups was 100% healthy, they might have been able to make it to the NBA Finals that season, which thus leads us to the iconic 2003-2004 season. Even though Rick Carlisle had been very impressive in his first 2 years as a head coach, the organization decided to go out and get Larry Brown as he decided to conclude his tenure with the Philadelphia 76ers. Also, rookie Tayshaun Prince, despite the fact that he struggled pretty significantly during the regular season, he showed a lot of improvements during the playoffs, so they decided to place him at the starting small forward position. And even though, yes, they decided to draft Darko Milicic over Carmelo Anthony, they immediately corrected their mistake during the regular season, as they heavily pursued a power forward in Rasheed Wallace to place next to Ben Wallace, as Darko Milicic really wasn't living up to the hype that a lot of people had around him. And with the final transaction, that brings us to the oh-so-familiar face of the Detroit Pistons that will go on to dominate the NBA for the next several seasons. At the end of the 2003-2004 season, the Detroit Pistons finished off with a record of 54-28, finished with the second-ranked defense in the NBA, and would go on to be historically one of the greatest defenses the league has ever seen. Out of their 82-game campaign, 11 of those games they were able to hold teams to under 70 points. 5 of those 11 games were consecutive. This is a team defensively that was able to hold their opponent to 41% from the field, 30% from behind the arc, and consistently dominate them despite the fact that offensively they really had nothing else to show for it. I'm not going to sit here and try to sugarcoat anything to you whatsoever. The numbers are not flashy at all. I mean, despite the fact that Ben Wallace is out there putting up ridiculous rebounding numbers, and yes, you can look at his blocks as well, but outside of that, there's nothing to sugarcoat here. This team was built off of the idea of defense wins championships, and that's what they would go on to do. Going through the postseason, there were moments in which they were able to hold their opponent to under 70 points, regardless if they were matching up against Jason Kidd, Allen Iverson, and eventually Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe. Which thus brings us to the Los Angeles Lakers, a team that over a year ago was fresh off of a three-peat that featured Kobe and Shaq, 2 future Hall of Famers, in their primes, and then they also added Karl Malone and Gary Payton, 2 Hall of Famers that were on the tail end of their careers, however were still being able to contribute to the organization. And then in the other corner we have the Detroit Pistons, a team that was composed of players that were bounced around the NBA, misfits that teams gave up on, a team that was historically one of the greatest defensive units the league has ever seen, a team that were massive underdogs in this series, however were able to beat that Los Angeles Lakers team in 5 games. The Detroit Pistons were able to neutralize arguably the greatest 1-2 punch in league history. And even though Shaq, he put up the numbers that he posted up, the key to their success was disrupting Kobe Bryant. Kobe finished that series averaging roughly around 23 points while shooting on 38% from the field and 17% from behind the arc. And on the other hand, despite the fact that this is a team not known for their offensive abilities, the Finals MVP winner, Chauncey Billups, finished that series averaging 21 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists on ridiculous shooting splits. And also we have to give much love to Ben Wallace. Despite the fact he wasn't known for his ability to score, still was giving them around 11 points per game, 13 rebounds, nearly 2 steals, and a block. The 2004 Detroit Pistons team is the definition of defying all odds. A team that was built around the identity of defense first. A team that, quite frankly, just does not have any sexy numbers. And I'm not even going to sit here and try to manipulate any stats to favor them, because it's no point. The reality is that was a unit that believed in a concept and willing to overcome whatever obstacles that people were putting in the path of their career of being great players. And they were able to achieve something that many people were not able to achieve. But for some people, it just wasn't enough. Unfortunately, there were many people who still doubted the abilities of the Detroit Pistons, claiming that the reason why they were able to win had more so to do with the dysfunction from the Los Angeles Lakers rather than the discipline from that Pistons team. But the response of doubt was also familiar from this group of players, and they were able to overcome yet again a lot of people and whatever they were going to put in their path of making the finals for the 2nd consecutive season. And in the 2005 finals, the Detroit Pistons matched up with the San Antonio Spurs, a well-disciplined, well-rounded, well-coached organization that they were able to take to 7 games. And if it wasn't for the heroics of Robert Horry in Game 7 and in Game 5, a lot of people, including myself, would easily say that they should have won that championship. Over the next 3 seasons, the Detroit Pistons will continue to dominate, making the conference finals every single year, which means for 6 consecutive seasons, they were able to make it at least to the conference finals, and obviously with 2 finals appearances, winning one of them. Through the same time period, the Detroit Pistons were never ranked lower than the 10th best defense in the league, and consistently were able to win 50 plus games. Now, the reason why I'm making this video is to shed light on one of the greatest teams in NBA history, and unfortunately too many people have forgotten how dominant this team was, because here we are several years down the line, and for whatever reason Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace have been denied of their presence in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And in my opinion, it's a shame, because this is a great example of too many people getting caught up in statistical excellence and not thoroughly understanding the whole purpose of why they take the floor on a night-to-night basis, and that is to win basketball games. But with that being said, never forget about the mid-2000s Detroit Pistons, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.
Detroit Basketball!